If you think you've been told everything about the Bangladesh crisis, then you must watch this report. Because this is perhaps the only report that will tell you the real reason why Bangladesh is burning. Here's the root cause. The country is in a complete mess today because it is caught in the crossfire of a major international war. It's not a war being fought with bombs and bullets. It's a strategic and territorial war between three global superpowers, US, China and Russia. The war between these three superpowers is not new. It's happening in various flashpoints. What's new is that they have targeted Bangladesh as the latest flashpoint, the latest battleground. Thank you for tuning in. This is Nadeem. You are watching Empire Diaries. Tonight, for the first time after more than a month of chaos, you will get a clear picture of what really happened in Bangladesh. We will clear the smoke once and for all. We will explain to you how the little country is being pulled apart by three different global forces. What you will see in this report is something you didn't get from the mainstream media, so-called experts and governments. So after watching this video, please spare a few seconds to write your view in the comments section below. One comment from you will be a priceless thing for us, as we will know your thoughts on the subject. So let's get started with what's really going on in Bangladesh. Let me narrate to you a timeline of certain events that appear to be unconnected. But once you connect the dots, the whole game becomes clear. We will start with the Ukraine war. You're wondering what Ukraine has got to do with Bangladesh, right? Yes, it's the war in Ukraine that lies at the root of what's happening in Bangladesh. In February 2022, Russian forces invaded eastern Ukraine to defy the US and launch a bitter war that is still raging. That was when the writing was on the wall for South Asia, especially Bangladesh, India's northeast region, and Myanmar. Russia's invasion of Ukraine signaled the arrival of a third major power on the global stage. Till that point, the world was caught in the crossfire of a strategic global war between the US and China, the two biggest empires of modern times. But with the Ukraine war, Russia jumped into the boxing ring as the third superpower of our times. As Russia carried out the invasion of Ukraine, an ally of the US, the government in Moscow decided to step up its presence in Asia. So Russia turned towards Bangladesh and decided to turn it into its new partner in South Asia. Russia already enjoys steady ties with India, but why did it start targeting Bangladesh? Because now that it was swelling in confidence, it wanted to counter the influence of both China and America right next to China's belly in eastern South Asia. Many people are under the wrong impression that China and Russia are dedicated allies. They are not. On some fronts, they work together, such as countering the US military and boycotting the US dollar. On many other fronts, they are rivals. So after Russia successfully snubbed the US in Ukraine, it turned to Bangladesh. The new Russian plan was simple: turn Bangladesh PM Sheikh Hasina into our good friend. Moscow went ahead and forged a strong new friendship with Hasina's government. All this was happening since early 2023, a year after the Ukraine war started. Hasina's growing friendship with Russia since 2023 is hardly covered by the mainstream media. Her Awami League party, which was in power at that time, was starting to engage in multiple projects with Moscow. Before the general election in Bangladesh in January this year, Putin's government openly supported Hasina's Awami League. In October last year, Russia announced that it will supply nuclear fuel for a nuclear power plant in Rupur area of Bangladesh. Soon after the news came out, the US government expressed anger at the new Dhaka-Moscow partnership. Around that time, the US decided to favor Hasina's rival, Khaleda Zia. Hasina angered America last November as well. In a surprise development, a fleet of Russian warships arrived on the shores of Bangladesh and docked at Chittagong port. It was clearly a signal to the US by both Bangladesh and Russia that they are together. In fact, while Hasina is now in India, she is exploring the option of getting asylum in Russia. Her party is trying to work out a deal. This Russia-Bangladesh friendship made both China and America uneasy. China has already been battling hard, trying to keep the US out of its vicinity. South China Sea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Tibet, America has been trying to surround and choke China for the past 5 years. The last thing that China wants now is a fight with another rising power in its backyard, which is Russia. So for tactical reasons, Beijing decided to change its stance on Dhaka. The Chinese government decided it will no longer support Hasina. Instead, it started favoring Khaleda Zia, Hasina's rival. If you dig deep, you will find detailed accounts of Chinese agents collaborating with Pakistani intelligence to fan the protests in Bangladesh. What happened next was China's decision to publicly snap ties with Hasina. In recent months, Beijing started distancing itself from the Awami League government. China was so upset with Hasina's proximity to Russia that it didn't mind publicly shaming Hasina during her last few months as PM. In July, a month before the protests began in Dhaka, Hasina went to Beijing to beg for grants and loans. It is something that she shouldn't have done as a country's leader. Taking foreign loans means you're signing away your country's economic freedom to foreign players. So Hasina went to Beijing begging for money with strings attached. But China cut short her trip and asked her to leave the country. She was openly humiliated. But we must remember not to have any sympathy for her and her corrupt Awami League party. Let's now move to the role of the US in this episode. As Bangladesh PM, Hasina used to repeatedly say that the US wanted to slice out a portion of Bangladesh. She said the US wants to create a new breakaway country in the tri-junction of Bangladesh, India and Myanmar. After that, it would plant a military base there. Why? So that the American military can have a strong land-based presence next to China. Beijing will start sweating if the Pentagon builds a base there. But to get into that region of east of India, the US first needs to create a vacuum. It needs a turmoil there at all costs. So that's why the US intelligence was looking for a trigger to cause unrest in Bangladesh. Around that time, Hasina's terrible decision on job quotas had angered the common people of Bangladesh. The US spotted the problem and started investing in it. It supported the protests in various ways, created disorder and ensured that the domestic movement removed Hasina's Awami League from power. Awami League, which is historically a corrupt party, has been dead against the US plan to build a military base on St. Martin's Island. St. Martin's Island on the Bay of Bengal is part of Bangladesh. Washington DC has been hell-bent on removing Hasina from power since 2023. That was since the time Hasina's government was moving closer and closer towards Russia. The US simply wants a military foothold in South Asia, but the US military hasn't been able to get a breakthrough. It couldn't find a way to plant a military base in Kashmir. It got thrown out of Afghanistan as well, and its plot to help Tibet gain independence isn't working out. Plus, Hasina shot down its proposal to turn St. Martin's Island into a US military base. So even before supporting the job quota protests, the US was constantly troubling Bangladesh diplomatically. First, it imposed visa curbs on Hasina's party workers. After that, it sanctioned officials of the Rapid Action Battalion for human rights violations. The US also supported anti-Hasina movements like the National Unity Government and the People's Defense Forces. Then finally, the US escalated its meddling and supported the latest uprising, toppling the government. After that, we saw two back-to-back developments that were quite expected. Both the developments clearly had the signature of the US. One was the move to install economist Muhammad Yunus as the head of the interim government. The other was the United Nations jumping into the picture uninvited. Right after Hasina escaped to India, the US planted its blue-eyed boy Yunus in Dhaka. It was a clear case of US diplomatic intervention. The US loves Yunus because he promoted the terrible culture of micro-loans among poor Bangladeshi people. For promoting loans, Yunus is also the poster boy of the World Bank and IMF, two prominent tentacles of Western hegemony. Yunus is also a donor to the Clinton Foundation. Clearly, he is a Western puppet posted there to push the American agenda of controlling Bangladesh. Soon after Yunus was planted in Dhaka, the UN announced that it is sending a fact-finding team to Bangladesh soon. It will be the first time since 1971 that a UN team will set foot on Bangladeshi soil. Now the problem is UN missions are generally sent to disturbed places with a hidden agenda. They are sent to pave the way for Western powers to dictate terms. UN mission teams pose as neutral peacekeepers, but they simply go in, meddle in domestic affairs and push Western agenda, especially pro-US policies. In fact, here are details of a secret US plan that the mainstream media has only touched upon lightly. For a long time, the US has been plotting to slice up Bangladesh and create a new country. According to the plan, the breakaway nation will be called Zogam, homeland of the Zo people, who are mostly Protestant Christians. The Zogam project includes parts of Chittagong and Bandarban in Bangladesh, parts of northwestern Myanmar and India's Mizoram state. This region is inhabited by the Kuki-Chin Mizo people. This entire zone is connected by land and they are home to foreign-funded militancy by Kuki-Chin terror groups. In northwest Myanmar, the foreign-funded Chinland Joint Defense Committee is fighting a war against the national military. In Bandarban and Chittagong of Bangladesh, the foreign-backed Kuki-Chin National Front is carrying out terrorist activities. The unrest has also spilled over into the Indian state of Manipur. Kuki militants under the banners of Kuki National Army, Kuki National Front and Kuki Liberation Army have been spreading terror and unrest. The US has a clever backup plan as well. If the Zogam project fails, it wants to kickstart another movement, It's for the creation of the autonomous region of Zalengam. The Zalengam project spans a wider area. It includes the Zogam plan plus the Indian state of Nagaland as well. So the hidden agenda of the US in carving out a separate country or autonomous region is to control it for future use. Once the breakaway zone becomes independent, the US can first send in a UN mission. The UN team will then slowly clear the path for a US military base there. These plans are not incredible because America has a long and dark history of foreign interventions. There's a book called In Covert Regime Change, America's Secret Cold War. In the book, author Lindsay O'Rourke says that from 1947 to 1989, the US tried to change other nations' governments 72 times. Among them, 66 attempts were covert operations and 6 were overt. US sponsorship of military coups has been highly effective. 9 out of 14 US-led coups were successful. Similar disclosures have been made by John Perkins, a former economic hitman of the US government, and also by Wesley Clark, a retired US Army officer. Both of them turned whistleblowers and revealed to the world how the US government, US corporations, and the US military secretly carry out regime change missions. Once you look at the trail of US interventions, the Bangladesh breakup plan will make sense to you. There's a well-known regime change in Iran in 1953 in which the CIA toppled Mossadegh's government and installed the Shah of Iran in power. Then there's the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba in 1961 by US forces. We've also seen repeated military interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Here's a quick list of some countries where the US government, its military, its intelligence agencies, and its corporations have intervened in the last 80 years or so. Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Venezuela, Panama, Haiti, Bolivia, Cuba, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Indonesia, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Palestine, Libya, Ethiopia, Angola, DR Congo, Poland, former Yugoslavia. Well, the list doesn't end here, it's longer. The point here is not to sympathize with Hasina and her corrupt party. In international politics, no one is clean. The purpose of this report is to make you aware that Bangladesh is sadly being pulled in 3 different directions by Russia, China, and the US. Which one of them will have the last laugh? Only time will tell who will win the strategic war, a war in which the last thing that all the sides care about is the Bangladeshi people. The only side that will suffer, no matter what happens, is the Bangladeshi public. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay awake.